Good afternoon, everyone. Like to open the meeting of the Cape Cod Commission Thursday, October 13th, 2011. It is now 3:10 p.m. We're at the 1st District Courthouse, Chamber of Assembly of Delegates. I would ask the secretary to call the roll, please.
Thank you. Barnstable, Royden Richardson.
Present.
Bourne, Michael Blanton.
Present.
Brewster, Elizabeth Taylor. Present. Chatham, Lynn Pleffner. Dennis, Richard Roy. Eastham, Joy Brookshire. Falmouth, Mario Di Gregorio. Harwich, Robert Bradley. Mashpee, Ernest Virgilio. Orleans, Leonard Short. Provincetown, Austin Knight. Sandwich, Joanne O'Keefe. Truro, Peter Graham. Wellfleet, Roger Putnam. Yarmouth, John McCormick Jr. County Commissioner Mary Pat Flynn. Minority Representative John Harris. Native American Representative Mark Harding. And Governor's appointee Herb Olson. We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'd request the Executive Director give his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, just want to mention that I attended the Bourne Financial Development Corporation's annual meeting last night. Had a chance to talk to a number of folks in Bourne about a lot of the projects that we're involved with there. We have our reset team engaged in Bourne on a number of projects on both the north side of the canal and on the south side of the canal. So we expect to be reporting back on a lot of that progress that we're making soon. Hopefully by the end of the calendar year, you'll see several things in front of you for your consideration that are part of that larger project. Also, last week we met as part of our Smarter Cape visioning session at RHCI with a number of folks in the community about how we're going to broaden our vision for leveraging Open Cape and the broadband initiative on the Cape. So there'll be more to discuss there, and another Smarter Cape conference that's being planned for the spring. Additionally, last week the State Water Infrastructure Committee met and is closing on their report to the General Court, which is important to us given the wastewater challenges, especially those challenges that relate to financing. So we look forward to hopefully having a copy of that report within 30 to 60 days. And then finally, I just want to welcome a new staff member to the Cape Cod Commission, our new regulatory officer, Jessica Rempel. Jessica, would you stand up and say hello? There we go. And other than that, the executive committee met, but talked primarily about litigation matters in executive session, so nothing to report there. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me back up. I overlooked public comment. I apologize. Anybody in the public like to speak? Yes. Come to the microphone. Identify yourself when you do.
Can I just clarify a point? When the Oceans plan comes up, will there be a chance to make comments at that point in time? Or do I need to make those at public comment?
No, that would be appropriate at that time.
Okay. Can I ask one question about the Oceans plan, or would I have to ask that at this time? At that time, can I just ask if the map has changed at all since the Assembly's meeting?
Yeah, let us deal with that at the appropriate time in the agenda, so we don't get, because I get confused easily.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. My name is Mitch Rell, and I'm a Brewster resident. I have two related issues. I'll make them quick. One, I think, well, I know, as you know, over the last couple of years at the various towns here on the Cape, there have been issues that have been brought up with applications for large-scale wind turbines. And mostly those projects have clearly been developments of regional impact. And each town tends to have somewhat different standards and different processes. Many of us in Brewster look towards the Cape Cod Commission as the one entity having responsibility for the entire Cape, looking to you as an independent, fair, and partial group of people who have a lot of expertise in the area to provide us with consistent, fair, and independent review of any projects that come before you, particularly wind turbines. Again, we look to you for that since it's very confusing at the local level. The other issue is, as you know, the Massachusetts Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy will be holding their public hearings next Thursday, the 20th, at the Barnstable High School on the so-called WESRA legislation. Now, if passed, this legislation would give the state unusual authority and leverage, not only over the local level, but apparently over the regional level as well. Cape Cod Commission and other Barnstable County governmental agencies. My question is, are there plans or intentions for the Cape Cod Commission as represented, or individual members of the commission will be testifying at that hearing, looking to maintain the county supervision and regulatory control, if you will, over DRIs? Is there an intention of the Cape Cod Commission to do that?
I would ask the executive director to respond, please.
Yeah, the bill, which I don't believe has changed in form, is one that we worked with the administration last year to specifically put language in there that protected the appellate route for commission review, so that project route reviewed by the commission could only be appealed through the commission's appellate review, which would be to land court or superior court, and could not be appealed directly to the EFSB. So we negotiated that language last year. We'll check, but the last time I checked, that was still intact.
Thank you.
Other public comment?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ann Kennedy. I'm a town councilor with the town of Barnstable, but I'm here not as a member of the council or representing the council in any way. These are my own concerns. I am, like the previous speaker, concerned about the various bills. There's more than one up at the State House that deal with particularly the land-based wind turbine or sightings. And as I read some of them, it appears to me that they attack and suggest very strongly a relinquishment of home rule, something that we hold very dear in the town of Barnstable, and of course I think all through the Cape. And what I think, the acts do give a nod to the local communities by allowing them to have committees to review proposals, but as I read it, those committees really don't have any authority because they can be appealed. And the citing authority, as I understand it, is ultimately the state. And to me, this is a direct attack on the home rule. I'm surprised if the town of Barnstable supports that. I would be surprised to know that because we have prided ourselves on the home rule, and we have fought the Cape Wind project primarily based on the home rule theory and the idea that we have not had a seat at that table. So I don't want to give up our seat. I don't know if the Cape Cod Commission can help craft the final bills in that matter, but I hope that you will do it. And it is, there are several bills, not just one, so I'm not sure whether one is coming to the top of the pile or not. There's Senate Bill 1666, House Bill 1757, House Bill 1759, House Bill 1775, and House Bill 2620. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make comment? Seeing none, we will move on to Cape Cod Ocean Management Plan and determination of appropriate scale. Heather McElroy, please.
Hi, thank you. Actually, I think I'm going to ask Jessica Wielgus, Commission Counsel, to just frame this for you a little bit before I give our presentation.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. For the record, Jessica Wielgus, Commission Counsel. Directed to the members who have not been participating in the Joint Committee, I know many of you did, to orient you as to where we are in this process. You may recall that we sent implementing regulations to the Assembly of Delegates for the Ocean Planning District of Planning Concern that were recently not adopted. So where we are in the process now is what you have before you is the Cape Cod Ocean Management Plan. And this is something that you have seen before. This was forwarded to you back in January for your review. Essentially what it does are twofold. You may remember that the state, through legislation, gave you the ability as well as a mandate to do two things. For offshore renewable energy development. They said that you needed to define what appropriate scale was, and it also said you shall review those developments as developments of regional impact. So recognizing that you have that mandate and looking at the Cape Cod Commission Act, we took a look at how we could preserve the work that you did and submit it to the Assembly of Delegates. And that's what this plan is. It essentially captures your definition of appropriate scale as you set forward to the Assembly within the implementing regulations. It defines what is appropriate scale, and it also defines what is not appropriate scale. And Heather will walk you through the plan and through that section to show you exactly what it contains. What it also does is provide the Commission as a whole some guidance for when you do review these projects as developments of regional impact, some things that you can take a look at. In particular, it preserves the ability for you to do a visual impact assessment for all developments of regional impact through the existing standards in the RPP. And it also does some other things in terms of the regional policy plan that Heather will outline for you. So where you are in the process is, you may recall that the District of Critical Planning Concern is still in effect right now. It is scheduled to disappear on October 21st because if no implementing regulations are put in place before that date, the district evaporates. So on that date, there will be no more district. The purpose of having the plan before you today is for you to adopt your definition of appropriate scale before that moratorium goes out of place. So I think that's your task for today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions after you hear from Heather. Thank you.
Okay. It's going to be finicky. All right, I'm going to come over here. All right. What I'm going to do is give you a very brief overview of the Cape Cod Ocean Management Plan. This is the document before you for adoption today. Briefly review the planning process and how that contributed to the development of this plan. We'll review, as Jessica indicated, the definition of appropriate scale, which is incorporated into the plan, Section 2E, and then briefly cover other development activity recommendations. So the plan has 3 sections. The first examines the resources and activities that exist within the planning area. This is the ocean waters offshore Cape Cod. It also discusses the priority conservation objectives of the plan. What are the resources that are critical to protect? What are the interests, the uses that are critical to protect? The plan also addresses the new allowable activities within the district. So Section 2 goes through step by step covering renewable energy development potential. sand and gravel mining, and cable and pipeline installations. Well, actually, I'm sorry, Section 2 just does the renewable energy component. And in Section 2, it defines appropriate scale for renewable energy projects, which, as Jessica indicated, state legislature has mandated that we define appropriate scale for renewable energy facilities in offshore waters. Section 3 addresses the sand mining concerns and cable and pipeline concerns and makes recommendations, which I will review at the end of the presentation. So, as I'm sure you're aware, the planning process was really a result of the District of Critical Planning Concern, the Ocean DCPC. To ensure that we had broad community engagement in this process, we established a policy committee which was comprised of one chief elected official from each of the Cape towns. We also convened a technical advisory committee composed of specialists in various fields relevant to the resources we were looking at, the interests that we were looking at. We also engaged stakeholder groups to try to incorporate their concerns into the plan. The policy committee first met last summer. The technical advisory work group started their work last summer as well. We held a stakeholder forum in November of last year to present initial findings and gather any additional comment, things that needed to be examined from the stakeholders' perspective in the planning process. And then we issued a draft Cape Cod Ocean Management Plan in January of 2011, this year. So over the course of this past winter and spring, we held more than 20 workshops and meetings with the policy committee, also with the joint standing committees, Cape Cod Commission Planning and Regulatory Committees. All of that work culminating in policy recommendations and regulations, those that were forwarded on to the Assembly of Delegates, at the end of that process. This plan that's before you today incorporates all of those recommendations that came out of the policy committee's work process and the joint standing committee process of the Cape Cod Commission as well. So what you see in the plan reflects the policy direction developed through that planning process. So what I'd like to do is just review some of the specific elements that contributed to the definition of appropriate scale through this process. As I'm sure you're aware, I've covered it many times. We utilized the state's mapped data for various critical resources, and those were incorporated into our definition of appropriate scale. Here you see the state's defined core habitat areas for endangered whale species. Next, various bird habitats, critical bird habitats, including that of for endangered tern species. We also looked at significant fisheries areas and vessel traffic lanes. Those were incorporated into this prohibited areas map, as well as 2 nautical miles setback from land. This was not state map data, but this was the result of conversations among the policy committee about what was an appropriate area for wind turbines, well, where were areas that were not appropriate for wind turbines to be sited, and the agreement was that within 2 nautical miles of the Cape's shoreline was not appropriate. Another component was the Cape Cod Ocean Sanctuary, which is an area along the Atlantic coastline running from Race Point to Monomoy, where all development activities are prohibited through the state plan. We incorporated that through our planning process as well. So all of that got wrapped up into this map, which I'm sure you're familiar with. This is the prohibited areas map that was forwarded on to the Assembly of Delegates. It has been incorporated into the Cape Cod Ocean Management Plan, as well as additional recommendations that the Policy Committee and then later the Cape Cod Commission adopted for the protection of critical resources within the planning area. Things like protecting navigation, providing adequate buffers to existing uses, protecting recreational and commercial fishing activities, ensuring that projects demonstrate a community benefit, protection of seascapes, that gets to a visual impact assessment of any project that might be proposed, protecting various natural resources ranging from marine wildlife to eelgrass beds, etc., and protecting shipwrecks and archaeological sites. So those were the recommendations that came out of that initial DCPC planning process. All of those have been incorporated into the Cape Cod Ocean Management Plan, which is before you today, specifically into Section 2E, which is the definition of appropriate scale. And we'll just go through this in a little bit of detail so that everyone's clear what the components are. The elements that were incorporated as mapped elements, effectively the areas that are part of the prohibited areas map, include that 2-mile buffer, areas located within 2 nautical miles of mean high water. Those are, any project located there is not of appropriate scale. Similarly, projects that might want to locate within high effort value commercial fishing areas, not of appropriate scale. Projects are not of appropriate scale when they're located within the commercial fish traffic areas, the commercial traffic lanes, within the Cape Cod Ocean sanctuaries, within the core habitats of the whales, within the core habitats of the terns, within an expanded habitat area of the North Atlantic right whale, and within intertidal habitats. So these reflect those recommendations that we just covered. Those are all areas that can clearly be accommodated through a mapped area and are represented by this map. The expanded North Atlantic right whale habitat does not show up particularly well. It's in the bay, but I think you all have the plan before you. You should be familiar with that. In addition to those mapped resources, there are statements within the definition of appropriate scale that address areas that are not easily represented by a map. So these are concepts like the buffers to ferry routes. Projects are not of appropriate scale if they are located within ferry routes. So here I've tried to simplify it by saying wind energy facilities are not of appropriate scale unless they are sited outside the buffers to ferry routes, unless they provide direct and indirect community benefits, unless they are sited and designed to avoid adverse visual impacts to scenic and cultural resources, and we can get into how that issue is addressed, sited to avoid adverse impacts to archaeological sites, to avoid impacts to fish and shellfish, priority habitats of rare species, seagrass, benthic habitats, and projects are not of appropriate scale unless the public benefits outweigh the cumulative adverse impacts. So all of these resources, it was determined through the planning process, were not easily represented as mapped areas because of their nature. Either the mapped data is inaccurate, or it's a resource that shifts, or there's a better protection provided through a narrative statement, which is what's found within the definition of appropriate scale in Section 2E. So I want to just look at this in a little bit more detail. Here's the prohibited areas map, Cape Cod prohibited wind energy areas. I want to compare that with the state's wind energy exclusion areas. So this map represents the areas that the state identified through the state's ocean management planning process as areas where wind energy facilities are not appropriate. They define those as exclusionary areas. These areas do not outright prohibit the development of wind energy facilities within these areas. There's a pretty strong statement that wind energy facilities are discouraged in these areas, but the door is left open to demonstrate that a facility could be sited in those areas without undue harm to the environment. So let's look at those two compared together, and you can see how the Cape Cod prohibited areas map extends protections to Cape Cod beyond what the state might provide. Again, the prohibited areas map for Cape Cod is where wind energy facilities are not allowed. And the exclusionary areas through the state planning process are where they probably are not allowed, but there's wiggle room. I wanted to provide just a couple of examples of some of those items that are protected through the statements in the definition of appropriate scale by illustrating what they look like as a map, a mapped element. Here we have the prohibited areas map with the ferry routes. Through the planning process, we determined that a better route to protect those ferry routes, given shifting routes or other considerations, is through a narrative statement. So wind energy facilities are not of appropriate scale unless they are located outside the buffers to establish ferry routes, navigational channels, and commercial shipping lanes, including but not limited to routes delineated by Morse, which is the state's mapping tool. Here's another example. This is the important fish resource areas. These green areas were identified through the state's ocean management planning process as of high significance for the protection of fisheries resources. However, in conversations with the Division of Marine Fisheries, they indicated that this is really only sort of the starting point of areas that need to be addressed and protected to adequately protect fish resources. So what we've incorporated as a statement in the definition of appropriate scale is not this mapped area, but that wind energy facilities that adversely impact the vulnerable life stages of species or groups of species of fish, as determined by Division of Marine Fisheries, are not of appropriate scale. We feel that gives a greater protection to fish resources than identifying a specific area on the map. So, what we're left with here is, through our definition of appropriate scale, is a mapped area of prohibited areas for wind energy facilities, and then areas where a development of regional impact review would be required for the review of turbines that might be sited in those areas. And you can see those areas highlighted in this lovely pea soup color. It's orange on the map that GIS prepared. So when a project comes to the Cape Cod Commission for review, part of what the Cape Cod Commission will do will be to apply the definition of appropriate scale to projects that are cited within these, or proposed within these areas, these orange areas. And you'd have to ensure that the projects protect buffers to ferries, provide community benefits, don't disturb archaeological sites, don't have any adverse visual impacts, result in no impacts to fish, rare species, eelgrass, benthic habitats, and that the benefits of a project outweigh the detriments of the project. In addition to that, you're going to be applying all of the minimum performance standards that are presently found within the regional policy plan to the review of these projects, including in the Heritage Preservation and Community Character section, an existing standard, HPCC 2.3, that requires the provision of a visual impact assessment. And part of the process that we've been through this year is the development of a methodology for that assessment. There's a product that will guide that process and how that tool can be used in the review process. In addition, there are standards within the economic development section of the regional policy plan: water resources, coastal resources, wildlife and plant habitat, transportation, waste management, and energy, all of which can be applied to the review of projects within these areas shown in the map, the green areas. The energy standards you should be familiar with, as those were recently adopted as an amendment to the regional policy plan, but they address things including noise, flicker, and decommissioning. All right. That's the overview of wind energy facilities and the definition of appropriate scale. Briefly, I'll just cover two other areas that the plan addresses, one of which was sand and gravel mining. This was an area of great interest and concern, both among the policy committee and among the standing committees of the Cape Cod Commission during the review process. And the recommendations that we've carried forward into this plan include things like additional planning and study of sediment processes, looking at regional and local sediment management plans. How should we apply beach nourishment materials within the district? Then there are also recommendations for the adoption of performance standards that would be incorporated into the regional policy plan through a separate process that would ensure the protection of resources protected under the Cape Cod Commission Act that might be impacted from sand mining activities, including things like ensuring compatibility with existing uses, protecting wildlife habitats, protecting cultural resources, looking at the cumulative impacts of sand mining projects within the planning area, assessment and mitigation of the physical impacts associated with sand mining. What happens when we move sand around, dig a dig hole, and put the sand somewhere else? Visual impact assessments for certain projects, demonstration that there are significant benefits that will result to the community or the Cape Cod ecosystem from these projects. These are not projects that we would want to go forward without ensuring there was some community benefit, and also a recommendation that any sand that is mined from the district or from the planning area would be used on Barnstable County beaches. Cables and pipelines, the recommendations are very similar. I won't go through them all. Some of the ones that are distinct for cables and pipelines is that standards should be adopted that ensure that shoreside impacts where the cable landfall is made are addressed, that cable routes through the planning area are coordinated to the extent feasible so that we minimize impacts and interference with existing activities, and that the economic vitality of the host community where that cable landfall occurs is not unduly affected. And I will note here that there's one editing issue that needs to be addressed in the plan before you, and that is just that in the recommendation section there are 3 locations where sand mining should be changed to cables and pipelines. So in summary, as Jessica indicated, the legislature has mandated that the Commission define appropriate scale for offshore renewable energy facilities as developments of regional impact. The Commission Act gives the power to the Commission to adopt this Cape Cod Ocean Management Plan. And what we're recommending to you is that you move to approve the Ocean Management Plan, including its definition of appropriate scale. And there are various staff here who are available to answer questions. Thanks.
Thank you for the good presentation and all the excellent work you've done with this. It's been a big piece of work, and it was done greatly. So, are there questions from the commission members regarding this plan? Comments? Comments first? Yes.
My question is there, if the commission approves this today, is there another step in the process, or is that final? Would that be the final?
That would be the final step. It's just the obligation of the commission to approve a plan.
Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Push the button. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remain concerned that we have not defined noise and flicker effectively, either in the this plan or in the subsequent regulations that we adopted a couple of months ago. And that until we do define them so that there is explicit information that is available that says We will not allow flicker for certain conditions. We will accept infrasound and its impacts. I think we should shelve this plan and not vote on it until we get those specific requirements met with on a basis that is factually measurable, rather than the sort of words like reasonably consistent or partly useful or almost there, which are the kind of words that are used right now in those specifications. I would like to see real specifications rather than just sort of editorial specifications such as we presently have.
Thank you. Yes, Royden.
I had a couple of questions that I would like to ask at this time.
A little closer to the mic, Royden. Yes, thank you.
Is that better? As close as I can get. I have a couple of questions, as many of you know, what some of my concerns are, and particularly as it has to do with the town of Barnstable and Craigville Beach. When this presentation was first made, it was my understanding from what I saw in terms of the map that the Craigville Beach area and out would be an area in which would be a suitable place to locate these wind turbines. And we had quite a discussion of that. I explained why my concerns and so on and so forth. And then subsequent maps that have come out, I haven't seen that empty space around Craigville Beach, and I don't understand why there was a change. But maybe it wasn't a change, maybe it was my lack of understanding the original maps. But I am concerned about that area, and I'm particularly concerned about that area because of Cape Wind. And there's 130-something wind turbines going to be there. And I've also learned since the last meeting that it would be a desirable spot for other wind turbines to appear because of its closeness to the cable. And the closer you are to the cable, the less money it's going to cost, you know, the developer. And that sort of made me think a little bit, you know, what is going to happen to this area? Another thing that I learned about wind turbines and is that they have a life expectancy of anywhere from 4 to 12 years. And so that means that there will have to be changing. And I also learned they have to be maintained. They just can't run in the wind forever. So that means that's going to be creating additional traffic out there in the water in terms of trying to maintain them. And why is Craigville Beach so special to me as opposed to all the other spots perhaps? Well, it is one of the major beaches in the town of Barnstable, and it is the major beach in Centerville. And people from all over the state and other parts of the country wait to come there in the summertime because of the atmosphere that there at Craigville Beach. Now, I would assume people would want to build windmills or turbines where the wind blows. And Craigville Beach is not a particularly windy beach. I think there are some other beaches around that, you know, take the prize for wind. I think of Silver Beach. I think of Mayflower Beach, and where off the coast of the down Cape, where people surfboard and all that sort of thing because of the great winds. And the other thing that I learned, that I know from experience, but the other thing that I learned, that in order to make it economical, you have to build these turbines high. And in discussion, I was reassured that the turbines that were going to be put there would be just like the turbines that we have down by the DPW in Hyannis, and they'd just be small and maybe inconsequential. But I have a real problem. It is so nebulous And, you know, and I want to be a participant, and I want to approve what's good in the long term, but I don't have any confidence with this. And that doesn't mean I'm against it, but I just have not got to the point where I can say, gee, that's great, good job. The other thing that I have a little problem with is the process. I mean, I was quite surprised at the meeting that we talked about this, to learn that all of a sudden we have the authority to do what we tried to do with the DCPC thing, you know, all on our own. And the representative from Barnstable, who is a town council, who spoke in terms of, you know, we want to be able to have something to say about what happens, and you know, particularly as it relates to our town. And the way the Cape Cod Commission is set up is that, you know, we go and we work on these things, and we bring them before the Assembly of Delegates, and the Assembly of Delegates say yay or nay. And that sort of ensures that people have a voice. I mean, we're all appointed, we're of the people, but we're not of the people of the same way. And I also wonder what kind of a message we're sending to the Assembly of Delegates and to our local municipalities. If we lose on one side, well, we can go ahead and we can do the other thing. I mean, maybe that's good, but it seems to me to be confrontational. So having said all that, which maybe if you put it all together, maybe you won't consider it very much, but I am very, very concerned about those issues, and so I just want you all to know that.
Thank you, sir. Elizabeth?
Thank you. This process has been going on for well over a year. It's been extremely well vetted. There have been the policy committee with representatives from all the towns on the Cape, plus the Vineyard and Nantucket, and even, I guess, Old Colony. I don't know if we had a rep from them. But it's, as I said, it's been extremely well vetted. Everyone has had a chance to bring up all issues that bothered them. And as was indicated by Jessica, the state did give the commission the power to enact its own regulations relative to this issue. And I'm very thankful that we have that ability, because since the Assembly and the wisdom did not approve this, and I was very surprised that persons on the Assembly subcommittee who approved it in committee then did not vote for it at the main meeting. And if we did not have anything in place, or the commission was not able to put anything in place on its own, we would have nothing. And Royden was mentioning we wanted a voice for Cape Cod. Well, if we don't approve this today, we have no voice. We have no protection whatsoever for any of these habitat issues, for any of these issues. If we find out that there are parts of this that we don't like, or we don't think they're strong enough, or they're not working, then we can change them. But to do nothing is just ludicrous as far as I'm concerned. We have to take action on this and approve it. And since the other parts for sand and gravel and cables and pipelines were not approved at the Assembly, there is nothing right now to control that. And I'm hoping the Commission will send it back to the Assembly to be approved, because that area is wide open. The state did not give us any regulatory power concerning those issues. So if we don't send this back to the Assembly and get an approval, there will be absolutely no control whatsoever on that. And I just can't imagine that the people in the towns on Cape Cod want these issues to be totally wide open. If we want some control, this is how we have to do it. It can always be changed. Regulations can be loosened up or tightened. Issues that aren't covered strongly enough can be worked on. But we have to have something in place. To be without it, we're wide open to anyone who wants to come in and do anything here. with absolutely no protection whatsoever. The state map is wide open, and we just cannot allow that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick.
Yes, again, with all due respect to my colleagues, I have to agree with Elizabeth. If we don't approve this plan, there is no plan, there are no regulations. As far as local control is concerned, one of the main focuses is that any development at all has to be of community benefit. And we also go into the point where even neighboring towns can comment on a project that one town may deem to be of benefit to them. And adjoining towns could decide that it wasn't of benefit to them, and that would be a consideration for any DRI that came before us. Thank you.
Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How do you go ahead and agree with both sides? Really, I'm going to echo both Mr. McCormick's and my colleague to the left. In that, this is a plan that we could use to start with. This is a plan that actually has a significant amount of work and detail put into it. Does it encompass every single situation we'd like to try to mitigate for the benefit of the community? No, it doesn't, but it certainly goes a fair way towards improving dramatically what the state has left us with. And to Mr. Putnam and Mr. Royden's concerns, I think they're absolutely right. Those are valid concerns that we would like to approach in the future, but this will give us a framework from which to start. It's been a pleasure to actually work with the Planning and Regulatory Joint Committee on this process, and the staff has put in a tremendous amount of effort. There was no rubber stamping. I think they would attest to that on the part of our committee. We certainly did run them through their paces over several meetings, delving into the details, and I think that yeoman's work was pulled off on this plan. To not approve this plan and to leave the Cape Oceans around our area just subject to the Massachusetts regulations would be a mistake. I'm going to go ahead and vote in favor of this plan. I'd encourage my colleagues to do the same.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Just to answer a couple of the concerns that have been brought up, and if Heather or Jessica want to jump in, just let me know. But just to put this in context, there are no commercial developments allowed anywhere out there. We're talking about community wind, and we're talking about a total of 24 turbines that would have to have a community benefit, which means they basically have to be municipal projects or CVAC projects to begin with. So we're not talking about commercial wind yet. The state designates commercial wind areas out there. And part of the process and part of the reason why we use the same methodology that the state used and expanded on that is to be persuasive to them when they revisit that state plan not to put any commercial designations out there. So I don't want people to be concerned about that. As it relates to the process, the state charged us with the responsibility to meter out 24 turbines, as it charged every coastal regional planning agency in the state. And that designation, as all the other RPAs are so designated, is separate and independent. It's our job. So what we're trying to do here today is our job. Now, there were two paths that we could have taken. One was to put together a policy committee and just come forward with a plan and the regulations like we have now. The other was to hope that nobody would come forward with a project before we had a plan in place that had some regulatory authority, so that had some authority and some weight to it. We instead chose to use the DCPC process. At the end of that process, we're required to go back to the Assembly of Delegates with an ordinance, and that's what we did. But their reluctance to adopt that ordinance doesn't in any way change the fact that we have to do the job that the state asked us to do. So that's why it's here. So instead of, if they had adopted those ordinances, they would have taken the appropriate scale determinations in the plan and incorporated them as county ordinances. And that's how we're tied to the Assembly. Whenever we produce work that we want codified as a county ordinance, it absolutely has to go through the Assembly of Delegates. There are a number of areas in economic development, in wastewater, and in wind, where we have separate statutory responsibilities given to us by the Great and General Court. And this is one of those areas. So I don't see it as confrontational. I think we could probably go back at some point in time to the Assembly and talk about it again. But we have that moratorium that's going to expire on the 21st. And just as I don't understand the Assembly that has twice now voted down ordinances that offered significant protections and would rather have none than some, I don't understand that process. We can always work to make these better. But this has been we used an unprecedented process this time of not only using the DCPC, but putting together a policy committee that had elected officials from every town on that board. And sometimes they were very far apart on the issues. But we had a very productive conversation over 12 months. We used a technical advisory committee on this also, and we used a stakeholder committee. So we took that extra measure as it relates to process to make sure that people were heard and that people that are directly elected in those towns were responsible for helping us put this plan together. And that was sort of a belt and suspenders approach. So I'm actually I'm proud of the process, and I think we're ready to do our job. As it relates to the map, marine spatial planning is a difficult thing to do because you wind up with a map and you wind up with lines on the map that are out in the ocean. But you can only draw lines around things that you're relatively sure aren't going to move around much. So what we have done in addition to that is we have in text a number of other prohibitions, a number of other limitations that simply aren't represented by the line on the map. So the latest presentation up there shows you that the entire DCPC district is protected and protected significantly. And in many instances, those regulations that are referenced in text only and not drawn on the map are much more significant and prohibitive than some of the ones that are drawn on the map. So the entire area is protected. And if we use Cape Wind as an example, we had relatively little to say on that. Now we have every project will be reviewed as a development of regional impact with fairly stringent standards. And as an example, to use Craigville Beach, which is a place that is near and dear to my heart also, the fish habitats that aren't drawn on the map, but which will be used out there, would protect Craigville basically from the beach to the federal line. And also the action of this body in protecting Craigville Beach as a DCPC has now established that as a cultural resource. So the text protections that pertain to cultural resources now pertain to Craigville Beach, even though there aren't lines drawn on the map. And additionally, there are other significant cultural resources identified on the south side there. It would not be an easy thing to do. So if the Assembly had adopted the ordinances, then we would have minimum performance standards that every project would be measured against in a DRI, and then you would get to your benefits detriments analysis as part of that DRI review. The Assembly didn't act, so we won't have those minimum performance standards out there, and it's disappointing in that cables and pipelines aren't covered, and sand and gravel, and that we won't have those enumerated for people that might be interested out there. So what we have now is the plan that will make these determinations first, and if it's determined based on the plan that it's not appropriate scale, you can't go forward. And that protects most of the area that's been identified out there. If you do trip DRI review, then we have to go in and we review the DRI, we use the plan, we use the existing standards, the land-based standards that apply to these wind turbines also that would be out there, and then we get into the benefits detriments analysis. There is an extraordinary amount of protection given by this plan and by action of the board, and I still don't understand why it would be better to do nothing than to do something and continue the conversation in good faith. So that's our commitment, and to Roger's point earlier as it relates, we have a consultant on board now. We're looking at giving those definitions through a technical bulletin, but again, I don't think you have the ability now, if something popped up out there, to review that, to look at flicker, to look at noise, even though they're not defined. We think they should be defined, and we are moving towards defining those issues. But to suggest that we should have no plan and no authority, and to suggest that we shouldn't do the job that the state gave us, that every other coastal RPA in the Commonwealth is doing, I think is not what we should do. I think we should do our job, and I want to thank Heather and Jessica at this point because they've done an incredible amount of work working with people from every community on the Cape in order to put this plan together. So thank you.
Thank you. Lynn.
I was a part of the original subcommittee that decided to nominate this whole area for a district of critical planning concern. So with that being said, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the Cape Cod Ocean Management Plan that includes the definition of appropriate scale.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I would, at this point, though, ask that we kind of pause for a minute. And I appreciate the quick nature, but I'd like to hear a little bit from the public on this issue and those wishing to speak about this plan. And it is not typically a public hearing. However, we will allow some public comment, a couple minutes for each person. Please identify yourself by name. Do I need to swear in people? No? Okay. Okay. People like to comment. Federal, state, or local officials.
Hi, I'm Ann Kennedy again, Barnstable Town Council. I'm not speaking on behalf of the council. Frankly, I don't know who the elected official from the town of Barnstable was. I've never heard from that person, whoever he or she may be, and the council was never advised of anything that was going on in this body or at the Cape Cod Commission about the management plan, although I have followed it myself through the Cape Cod Commission website. Having said that, I agree wholeheartedly with Ms. Taylor and the other gentleman that spoke and Mr. Nitzwicki on the necessity of having, I think, of having this ocean management plan in place. And for the very same reason that I brought up home rule before, Roy, this is, I believe, a protection of the Cape and its home rule from the dictates of the state. Right now, the state can decide where these are sited. And this is the buffer that we have as a regional community. I don't think home rule is going to work without it. So I appreciate your comments on Craigville Beach. Barnstable is a big town. It includes the north side also. And there are, some of my concerns are that some of the, I guess you call them provisional sites, may allow some of these sightings. And some, if you, for instance, if a turbine is allowed in Brewster, that has impact from Orleans all the way down to Bourne as far as visual impact. Also, there are some unprotected, just from my view of the map, less protected, I should say, areas of the Great Marsh, areas north of Sandy Neck. It looks like all of Barnstable Harbor is unspecified as prohibited. That's unlikely that there would be one place there, but so I would ask in your further review of this that you look at those areas and try to give them more protection. But I personally am supportive of the Commission's efforts on this regard. I'll probably get in a lot of trouble for this, but that's my position, and I do think that you've done a good job, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other federal, state, or local officials?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Sims McGrath from the Orleans Board of Selectmen. I was the Orleans representative to the Policy Committee on the Ocean Management Plan. I will agree with the previous speaker that the discussions were varied and lively on this. A lot of different perspectives came from pretty far afield to come to agreement or at least understanding of the necessity of some of the elements that are in these findings of appropriate scale, I think is what's in front of you today. They are far more restrictive than a first reading would suggest. The state's overarching standards do not take into account the unique needs of the Cape as a region or the individual communities that make up the region. Enacting these findings of appropriate scale give the Cape an opportunity to be in charge of its own destiny, to find for the Cape what is right for the Cape, and not have the dictates of the overarching plan that is designed for every region, regardless of its unique needs. We have an opportunity to enact something that is more restrictive, more refined, and more suitable to the Cape. I encourage your support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other state, local, or town officials, please.
Thank you. Charles McLaughlin, Assistant Counsel in Barnstable. I'll be very brief. I know that an awful lot of work has gone into this, and I commend those efforts very sincerely. As I've said before you, I think there's quite a bit of work yet to be done on this project, and the body of work done in reference to the Cape Wind project has a host of lessons that need to be examined, and the plans that were used and supplied by the state to the commission, either consciously or at least by omission, do not address, perhaps knowingly, a lot of the issues that were raised in the Cape Wind case, and hence you see Nantucket Sound with areas that from evidence that perhaps everyone agrees to, including Cape Wind, with respect, for example, to endangered species and the like, that ought to be considered by a subcommittee and perhaps resulting in amendments to the maps. So I certainly am very willing to work with representatives and a subcommittee to provide as much of that material as possible, and perhaps at the end of the day, we could all agree that there should be some refinements, particularly in the south side. Some of the issues, and one other issue that's near and dear to my heart is the lessons of emergency response and the cost that will be thrust on towns, whether it's on the north side in the bay or on the south side, depending on where these units get placed, the opportunities for personal injury and the like, and the needed equipment and training and budgeting necessary to send in emergency responders is a huge issue that the towns and the commission need to be vitally aware of. So those are just a couple of examples. I really think we could spend some very productive time, and I'd like to really just suggest respectfully that the ball be picked up as soon as possible while this is fresh on everyone's mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Other federal, state, or local officials like to speak? Hold on just a minute. Let me see if anybody from the general public. I'll be right with you. Yes, come forward, please.
Thank you. Lillian Green of Wellfleet. And I want to thank you for your time today, and I also want to thank the Commission and for all of their hard work. I really, truly feel that there was a lot of work that was put into this. And I will say that as Heather went through her presentation, the one thing I did notice, with all due respect, is the fact that the people and the health of the people wasn't considered when this whole process was being considered. That was the one thing that was lacking here. And I brought this material to you in the past, and also to the Assembly of Delegates, and to the Commission and to the staff of the Commission. And I feel that this is a really big deal. And I know that we were told today that on October 21st, the DCPC or the moratorium goes away, but you have the power today to to nominate another DCPC and to bring medical folks in and an interdisciplinary team of people such as psychoacousticians or people who talk about acoustics, not just the levels of sound, but how it affects people. And there are people that have that specialty. And why do I say that? And if you also nominate another DCPC, you'll be able to address Mr. Niedzwicki's concerns about sand, gravel, and pipeline. And I think also the fact that there is no ordinance, and there will be no ordinance as of the 21st. And I, too, am very concerned. I'm very concerned about the fact that when I was in New Zealand and Australia this year, I met with people. I sat in their homes that live more than 2 miles away from wind turbines, the nearest wind turbine, and they were seriously physically ill. I mean, seriously in that we have documents from medical physicians who have records of these people over many years. They have, for instance, they have normal blood pressure, but when the turbines are spinning, they call it, or in operation, and they live more than 2 miles from the nearest turbine, their blood pressure spikes dangerously high. One person, and we have this on videotape, and we've offered to show it here, but we've been told that we can't. And what I would say to you is this person's sleeping blood pressure spikes his systolic rate. His normal rate is 120 over 80 or 117 over 80. But at sleep, his systolic rate went up to 167. His waking rate went up to 190. Now, if anybody's at all conversant with your own blood pressure, you know that those are dangerously high numbers. That's not the only person. There is someone living right here in Falmouth who has the very same situation because they live too close to wind turbines. That is a fact. And you can call it anecdotal. That's fine. But what you might think is anecdotal and what a medical professional would think is anecdotal are two separate things. These are people who are sharing their lived experience. You're talking about scientific papers published in, and what I just had sent to Mr. Niedzwicki and other members of the Cape Cod Commission are several studies that have just been completed and are coming out. And these are coming out. There are a lot of them, and there are a lot more in process, and we know that they're in process because we're communicating with the authors of these studies. The latest study is by Daniel Shepard.
Would ask you to wrap it in a minute,
okay.
please.
Okay, but these are showing that there is serious medical harm to people that live too close to wind turbines. We know that over water, sound carries farther, and I just ask you today to please consider seriously a DCPC. I know that you can do it without, Mr. Niedzwicki will probably say that we can do it without, but I'm asking you to consider another DCPC. There is no time limit from my understanding for the state. You do have the power to do this and to study other things such as adverse health impacts to people. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Other members of the public? Seeing none, I have a member of the commission who would like to speak. Mr. Richardson?
I would just like to make my position quite clear. I have been an enthusiastic supporter of this work from its very beginning. And I was one of the people that went all around the Cape, and we listened to what people had to say and so on and so forth. In the process, we had different pictures that were theoretical presented to us in showing what wind turbines would look away from, you know, offshore and that sort of thing. And one of the ones that I saw was a picture, in my thought, a picture of Craigville Beach. And I saw the wind turbines out there on the horizon. And I asked the question, and I was assured that, you know, that was just to show people what might be and that sort of thing. No, it wasn't Craigville Beach. But then when we came down and we saw the maps, there was the protected area did not include Craigville Beach and also down around Yarmouth. And then the second set of maps that I saw that there was protected area there. And that confused me, and that concerned me. And so I agree with Elizabeth. I agree with Paul. I've agreed with most everything the people have said supporting these things and wanting a way to protect us. But, you know, as I took offense because those unprotected areas which were in the map that were first presented was making an area that was already at risk because of Cape Wind. And in the beginning, we were told we had to find places for 24 of these things around Cape Cod. And all of a sudden, I see 130 and 24 in one location. I didn't see any other open spaces. And I didn't think that was fair. And I think we need to all share the responsibility so it's not just off of one place, to dilute it. And but I'm all in favor of, you know, the matter that's before us, but I am not in favor of, you know, Craigville Beach and the town of Barnstable taking, you know, the thrust. And I think that needs to be made clear, and I think that every town should be willing to share in this kind of thing, and to have their wind turbine or to whatever it is. So that's, I just want to make that clear. I'm not against it, and I've worked for it, and maybe harder than some others, who knows. But anyway, that just wanted to clarify my position.
Elizabeth.
Just as further clarification for what Wrighton is talking about, when you look at the map on the screen, the area within which we are talking about for our plan is totally protected, essentially, for tern habitat and for fisheries habitat and fisheries areas. So the area within that outline on the south side of the Cape looks to me like it is totally an area to avoid having wind turbines. The white area beyond that is state control, and that is wide open, but that is not within our control. If we want to get total control of Nantucket Sound, then we have to go to our legislators and change where that line is. But we have totally protected that area within that outline on the south side of the Cape. Craigville Beach is protected as much as it can be protected. We can't do any more. The state has to come in.
I won't speak again, but I agree with that. And the thing is, but when it was first presented, that is not the picture that I saw, and nor was it the picture was presented. I don't know where that picture is. I even called Paul at home one night asking, they changed the maps, and I was just looking for information.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just as it relates to the map, maybe this is what Heather was going to say. What's being presented, the problem with the map originally is we just showed those areas where there were hard lines out in the ocean. There were all these other protections that were protected by language that would be applied in a DRI. And all we've done is to try to help clarify that issue, is to put them on the map. And so anything out there is going to trigger DRI. All of those are going to be measured against any potential project out there. And we tried to explain that. But you know, we really needed to put it on the map, I guess, for it to start to click with people that it was entirely protected. Because what the impression that the original map left people with it was almost like as part of the spatial planning, and other RPAs are considering doing this, nominating as of right sort of locations where you'd want to encourage development. There's none of that on this map. I mean, that doesn't exist. Other RPAs may feel differently. I think Councilor Kennedy mentioned a provisional area. There's a provisional area in the middle of Cape Cod Bay that the state has identified, and Old Colony has half of it, and we have half of it. Old Colony may see that as a place where they would want to develop, which is why we brought them in as part of the discussion over the last year. But there is no as-of-right zoning. There's no, we're not trying to target any areas for development at all. We're really trying to give as much protection and give the people of the Cape as much say over what happens out there as they've ever had.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments or remarks, I would return. I think it's appropriate to return to the motion. And I don't think we need a refresher. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Abstentions? So moved. Yes, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I just want to apologize. When I spoke earlier, I really need to thank staff. They have been working on this night and day, and I'm sure they dream about it at night. And thank you, Heather and Jessica and everyone else who worked on this. And the people who were on the technical advisory work groups and the policy committees were all people who have very busy lives. And I really appreciate their serving on those committees, because every time you look at any committee on Cape Cod, it's the same people. And they all go to the same meetings. And I just want to thank them for their time, because I know I spend most of my life go to meetings and I know what it's like. And I just want to say thank you. And thank you, Paul, for helping to nudge everything along here and dealing with the state on this too. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, we have a notification of withdrawal. Yarmouth Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. Andrea Adams.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Andrea Adams. Basically, in your packets today, the commission members would have had a September 28th, 2011 memorandum under my signature and a copy of a letter from Mr. Hinchy, the town administrator in the town of Yarmouth. As you may know, the Cape Cod Commission had been beginning the process of reviewing the Yarmouth Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. Essentially, on September 19th, the Commission received a letter from Mr. Hinchy, Yarmouth's town administrator, withdrawing the town's Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan from Development and Regional Impact Review. I'm a Yarmouth resident, so you also may know that a ballot measure on a special town meeting and a subsequent ballot measure for a money article failed, so they were not able to go forward at the local level. Yarmouth CWMP was undergoing Development of Regional Impact, or DRI, review because the project required preparation of an environmental impact report, which is subject to our regulations per Section D of our enabling regs. Basically, the project is not going forward at the local level nor at MIPA. So commission staff suggests the commission vote to formalize the town's withdrawal of the CWMP from DRI review. And the project contact for the town was informed that it was going to be on today's agenda, but also that it was not necessarily necessary for anyone to be present. So that's all I have at this point.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say, as Yarmouth's representative, that personally I was deeply disappointed in the vote, but the people spoke. We had a water implementation committee that was appointed by the selectmen, and they really did a yeoman's job getting the word out and spreading the word. And the people that went to those meetings, I think, had a much better understanding, and for the most part were in favor of the plan. There was a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of naysayers, but I just wanted to express my thanks to the people who worked on that plan for Yarmouth and particularly the Water Implementation Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the members? Mr. McCormick, would you like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the withdrawal of the Yarmouth Comprehensive Wastewater Plan, DRI.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? So moved. The next agenda item is Cape Cod Healthcare, Inc., modification to development agreement. Andrea Adams.
Thank you for your indulgence. Again, for the record, my name is Andrea Adams. I'm the Cape Cod Commission Senior Regulatory Planner. This is a little bit anticlimactic because it's the same thing that you sort of had to sit through at 3 o'clock today with the Regulatory Committee. Why it's before the full commission is because it's a development agreement. So to just recap for some people who might not have been in the audience earlier today, what's before the Cape Cod Commission, the full commission today, is consideration of an amendment to 2003 development agreement for Cape Cod Healthcare, Cape Cod Hospital. It concerns about a 40-acre parcel of land between what's called Addicks Lane or Hadaway Road and Finney's Lane over by the BJ's store in Hyannis. It's the partial sand and gravel pit behind the BJ's store. That's an area subject to a development agreement in 2003 to build approximately 263,000 square foot medical campus in multiple buildings. The term of the development agreement is 12 years, and the first phase of that overall campus is the Wilkins Cancer Center, which is currently under construction. The modification that the Regulatory Committee took up in a special meeting earlier today at 3 o'clock in this room was to decide whether the requested changes to the development agreement as represented by Attorney Eliza Cox of Nunham, McLean and Fish were substantial or non-substantial within the terms of the definition of that in the Cape Cod Commission's regulations governing development agreements. Basically, the section of the regulations that were in place in 2003 that deals with development agreements says that the Cape Cod Commission can approve non-substantial amendments to development agreements without going through a public notice and public hearing process. What you have before you that I just passed out is a draft, because it still needs your vote, of a modification decision to the development agreement. And again, it looks very similar to a decision that you might see on a DRI. And if you turn the page, on page 2 through the end, it shows you what the changes to the development agreement would be. There are changes to conditions T2, basically item number 6. The original development agreement envisioned that there would be a total number of bike racks that would be sufficient to accommodate up to 40 bicycles, because we want to encourage alternate modes. What the amendment would do would basically say Wilkins will provide, the cancer center, which is the first phase of the overall campus, will provide at least one bike rack of up to for 6 bicycles, but as the campus is built out in phases, which was envisioned by the original 2003 development agreement, they will keep adding enough facilities for bicycle racks until they reach the specified 40, enough to secure 40 bicycles. The next change at the bottom of page 3 is sort of a sequencing change. It describes when one of the TDM parcels that was required to be put into a restriction to be taken out of development potential will happen. That's why it says which is part of phase 2. And then the last requested change from Attorney Cox was with respect to condition T5, which is shown on page 4. Basically, there was, and you can read the first part of the condition, which is not new. New text is shown in bold or big, fat, black type. There was a calculation of some traffic credits for the overall development to account for the 260,000 some odd square foot overall build out. And what the change would do would basically attribute some amount of that money to the Wilkins Cancer Center, which is part 2, and then meter it out as needed to the rest of the phases, because the Wilkins Cancer Center is something on the order of 23,000 square feet. It's the first part, so the change to T5 just makes note of that and allows them to use additional credits as further development proceeds. As most of you were present in the room, you know that the Regulatory Committee voted unanimously to endorse these changes. And basically what we're looking for from the full commission is a similar endorsement that the proposed changes to the development agreement, as I've outlined them in the draft modification decision, are non-substantial, that they can be done through this method without a public hearing. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I believe Glenn Cannon, our transportation engineer who worked on the original project, is available to answer any questions if you have some.
Thank you. Any questions from commission members? Seeing none, I move that the modification to the Cape Cod Healthcare, Inc. Development Agreement, DA-02014, be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. Maybe we ought to have Leonard Short read that. Yeah, Leonard. Please, hearing notice, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing, Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. So final hearing hyphen draft decision. Andrea Adams. And we have a hearing notice to be read.
Actually, first, sir, you have a short subcommittee meeting to address some draft minutes. And the hearing notice is attached to what I'm giving you.
Very good. Just hold on just a minute. Okay, I need someone from the subcommittee to approve a draft set amendment minutes. I don't see any date on this.
Roger Putnam is the chair.
Okay. Roger?
I'm sorry to
It's okay.
intervene in your chairmanship, but we have two things. We have the minutes of the last meeting, which you all have received copies of, and I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Having heard the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Having heard a motion and a second, is there any discussion of the minutes? Hearing none, I will ask for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? No one is opposed, therefore the minutes are accepted. I can now turn the commission meeting back to the chairman, Peter Graham, and thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Putnam. Were there two sets of minutes? No? Just one? Just one, okay. Looks like I opened the public hearing by asking a commission member to read the hearing notice. Yes. Leonard declined, so please proceed.
The Cape Cod Commission will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, October 13th, 2011, beginning at 3:00 p.m. in the 1st District Courthouse, Assembly of Delegates, Chamber Route 6A, Barnstable, Mass. This project will be reviewed pursuant to Sections 12I and 13B of the Cape Cod Commission Act, Chapter 716 of the Acts of 1989 as amended, and Sections 2, 3, and 7 of the Development of Regional Impact, DRI, enabling regulations. The project will be considered for DRI approval. This project will be heard pursuant to Sections 12I and 13B of the Cape Cod Commission Act and Sections 2, 3, and 7 of the DRI enabling regulations. The purpose of the hearing is to allow for proposed corrections to and comments on factual information contained in the draft written decision. This notice is being published as required by Section 5 of the Cape Cod Commission Act. Project name, Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. Project applicant, Town of Orleans through the Planning Department. Project location, Orleans, Massachusetts. Project description, a comprehensive wastewater management plan for Orleans, Mass. That evaluates a preferred alternative plan for wastewater treatment and disposal through the use of the existing Tri-Town septic treatment plant and plant site.
Thank you. At this time, I need to swear in anyone who wishes to give public testimony. If you would all stand, please. Raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Andrea Adams,
Do hereby swear that the testimony I'm about to give
do hereby swear that the testimony I'm about to give
is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, my name is Andrea Adams, and I'll be presenting the staff report. I'd also like to note for the record that all of you received, in addition to a copy of my PowerPoint presentation, a letter dated 12 October 2011 from Bev Carney with comments on the project. The presentation covers a project description, the Commission's jurisdiction, the procedural history, the subcommittees. Sorry, I can't seem to get rid of it. Oh, that's lovely. Sorry. No, it seems to still want to be there. Coastal resources, heritage preservation, community character, and transportation. Water resources will actually be covered by Mr. Camerari. I'll also cover the findings for approval and conclusions. In terms of a project description, it's a comprehensive wastewater management plan. It covers all of the town of Orleans. The primary focus is on nitrogen management. The preferred alternative site involves the reuse and expansion of the existing Tri-Town septic treatment plant. It also involves the construction of new treatment capacity and the construction of sewer mains over phases and the construction of what's called cluster treatment systems in key sub-watersheds. In terms of the Commission's jurisdiction, the town was required to prepare what's called an Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, for the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, also referred to in my presentation as the CWMP, pursuant to the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, or MEPA. Section 2DI of the Commission's enabling regulations requires that projects that must prepare an EIR are automatically a development of regional impact. The Commission also has a process under a memorandum of understanding with the MEPA unit to allow projects that are required to prepare an EIR to undergo what's called a joint review process, and the town of Orleans elected to do that. In a short procedural history, the application for Joint Commission MEPA review was made in May of 2009. The subcommittee held hearings to comment on the MEPA scope for the MEPA review in June '09 and in January 18th of this year. The intervening time, the town was preparing various documents as part of the MEPA process. The Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, that's what the acronym is, issued his certificate completing the MEPA review on the 28th of January of this month. As I note, the Section 7 of the enabling regulations requires the Commission to hold a hearing on the development of regional impact within 45 days of issuance of the Secretary's certificate. The subcommittee hearings were held on the dates shown in March and in April and May of this year. The subcommittee also held meetings on the development of regional impact in April, June, and July of this year, and the subcommittee met to review the draft decision that's before you in September and October. And at its meeting in October on the 7th, the subcommittee voted to approve the project as a DRI with conditions and to forward it to you for discussion at your meeting today. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Cambereri to give the Water Resources and Coastal Resources section of the staff report. Would you like your own? Okay.
Time to get glasses out. Just tell me. For the record, I'm Tom Cambereri, Water Resource Program Manager for the Cape Cod Commission. And unfortunately, this has
has not worked, so I will. Introduce the project to you. The Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan will sewer 50% of the town. It's over 2,600 properties. Over nearly half of those will remain on Title V systems. The flow from this program will ultimately treat 640,000 gallons of wastewater per day. The project also accounts for growth within the planning period, and the planning period for this project is 20 years. So from the time it begins, it will take 20 years to fully achieve the goals of the project. That will account for residential growth at 26% and commercial growth at 8%. The estimated cost is $150 million, and the property tax, the method for payment at this time is property tax assessment at 80% and betterment cost at 20%. Cost to the average homeowner would be approximately $2,600 a year. Now, the project, as Andrea indicated, began its MEPA process in 2009, but actually the town of Orleans has been hard at work on this project since 2001, with beginnings of putting together a wastewater management committee. And we have worked in the commission and other agencies of Barnstable County in hand with the town of Orleans. And here's a over that period of time. This project has a long history of analysis and evaluation for a variety of the needs assessment, looking at what the wastewater needs were in the town, developing the alternatives analysis, the evaluation, detailed evaluation of those alternative analysis, and coming up with a recommended plan that its initial plan started in 2008. It's now 2010 is the final plan that came about with the MEPA filing, and now here we are, 2011, in the final stage of evaluating the DRI. Oh. Thank you, Andrea, very much.
My apologies, it's a very old computer, so it has trouble when it has a couple of different files up at the same time. Which slide would you like?
I just finished that one. And, and now I will go back to this driver's seat. I have 6 takeaway points for you on the Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. The first, addressing coastal eutrophication and the TMDLs. Significant amount of work began in Orleans with its participation in the Massachusetts Estuaries Project, sampling their waters, getting the data they needed, contracting with SMAS, getting those TMD and getting those coastal water quality studies. So this is the driving factor for the CWMP, is the restoration of coastal water quality and compliance with the TMDLs. The plan also provides infrastructure for sanitary and community aesthetic needs and economic development. The plan is a composite of sewering, centralized treatment, continued use of Title V systems, with an opportunity for decentralized systems. It includes non-structural elements for fertilizer reduction, stormwater treatment, enhanced natural attenuation, and land use controls. The CWMP has done an outstanding assessment of opportunities for regional infrastructure sharing, particularly with the towns of Eastham and Brewster. And the plan provides for flexibility in its 20-year implementation through the adaptive management plan, as you'll find in the conditions of the DRI decision. In the review, the subcommittee's review for water resources, we looked at the 4 main goals of the water resource program about drinking water, restoration of the ecological integrity of the marine and freshwater systems, and obviously use about
appropriate sewage treatment facilities, and stormwater management was a piece of it as well. The decision document that you had in front of you has 61 findings that the subcommittee has found and gone over through this process. I just have a, I don't want to send an error report, do I? I just put a smattering of several of the water resource findings components on here. I also handed out to you a chart showing a breakdown of the findings and conditions, kind of a cheat sheet guide. And the first 13 findings are basically about the resource and the science and the TMDLs, and those are shown on the top three about the MEP science, the Nauset Marsh report, and different changing conditions about Pleasant Bay water quality. The next 14 findings are about the CWMP and a description of the CWMP. 15 findings are about the facility site and its characteristics and the issues about that. And you can see in the middle 6 findings having to do with area critical environmental concern, Namscayket Marsh nitrogen assimilation, freshwater assimilation, groundwater monitoring, ecological monitoring, coliform bacteria. About 17 findings have to do with regional opportunities, adaptive management, and potential and allowing potential changes along the way of the project's implementation. So some of the big 3 issues: wellhead protection, drinking water. Orleans has well protected their drinking water supplies and basically does not need sewering in this. That whole area, the black dots are the public water supply wells in Orleans that have been protected by watershed a number of decades ago as an excellent strategy. There may be some relevant sewering within the lower well area there that may accrue some benefits. Freshwater ponds, 64 freshwater ponds in the town of Orleans. A number of them have been sampled. They have a very active ponds coalition in Orleans that the commission and other agencies have worked with. And they have, within the CWMP, provided 5 in-depth studies based upon the data coming from those studies, and have incorporated the various needs of those ponds within the CWMP. I boiled down the issues of nitrogen and TMDL compliance into this graphic. This shows the major watersheds for Orleans, and that's Pleasant Bay in pink, Nauset Marsh in blue, and Cape Cod Bay embayments to the north. And when it comes to budgets, see that the Rock Harbor is about 70%, it requires about 70% nitrogen removal. Nauset Marsh, the blue area, will require 55% nitrogen removal as a placeholder. And Pleasant Bay has, its sub-watersheds range up to 100%, but collectively it's about 58% nitrogen removal is required. Now the embayment system, the Namscayket Marsh system that the town of Orleans shares with Brewster on the line, actually is a kind of a creek, riverine morphology that actually has excess nitrogen capacity. And this plays an important role within the CWMP. So in other words, the amount of nitrogen can be increased within this system by 261%, and it would still it would still meet its standards. I want to talk a little bit about the facility siting issue that was a major component of this decision. The facility site is the Tri-Town location of the Tri-Town site. It's within the Namscayket Marsh watershed, shown by the little blue box, adjacent to the town boundary line in Orleans, and the town's share of the watershed. Brewster is about 87% by area, and Orleans is 13%. Because this is a tri-town site facility, in addition to the extensive work that was done by Wright Pierce, the engineering firms for the town of Orleans, the site also benefited by numerous studies done in the early 1990s by the U.S. Geological Survey, and these assisted greatly in the characterization of the site and our understanding of it, and gives us confidence in the siting of this facility on this site. We've also looked at salinity and flow. The nice colorful graph shows a salinity from 30% out in the bay up to about 15% in the upper reaches of the marsh. And in the bar graph is the relative amount of flow of water at the mean tidal volume as compared to the wastewater flow at its design flow. So you see it's very, very low, and we have looked and with the engineers at these issues of salinity and flow with the subcommittee, and the findings reflect that. We looked in some detail at the assimilative capacity of the Nantucket Marsh. So what was, if we know that it has, you know, an additional 261% nitrogen can be put into it, how much is being taken? So going from the bottom quarter of red, that's 20% is loading is taken up by the existing land use in Brewster. 8% is taken up by the existing land use in Orleans. 11% will be taken up by the proposed facility on this of the assimilative capacity. And of interest, because the Tri-Town site was there, we look at the flows and a much higher concentration that the Tri-Town site has. The Tri-Town site was taking up 7% of the assimilative capacity. So even though the new facility will discharge significantly more wastewater, it is treated to a significantly higher value, and so that the additional percentage is only 4. And then we have to account for build-out, leaving about 54% as the excess capacity for this embayment. And if you round out the fat figures, it's actually 55%. Okay. This shows a preliminary site layout for the facility, and this is a preliminary one. The town will be doing a preliminary design and 60% design, final design. Those designs will come in as conditions of the project so that we can review them for coastal, wetland, endangered species buffers and issues and mitigation, as well as review the site plan for stormwater and turf management issues related to water. Now this chart shows the Orleans percent of TMDL attainment by phase. So starting with phase 1 and going through phase 6, we show the percent of the required removal that will happen, and you see that it goes over that period of time and requires the full implementation of the plan to reach 100%. Now this is the 100% of the Orleans component of the amount of nitrogen that needs to be taken out by the TMDL. There's also the components of Brewster and Eastham, particularly for Nauset and Rock Harbor, that also needs to be taken out for there to be a full regional attainment of the TMDL. And this, you'll find, was is part of the findings and conditions of the report. Now, one of the things that one of the components that is included in the plan is these proposed cluster systems. And in red are the cluster systems with the areas that will be served. And part of the discussion and the decision document relates is that Pleasant Bay has seen some improvement in water quality. However, the water quality in the upper reaches of the embayments is still impaired. So these cluster systems will allow the town to reach out, get a expedited amount of removal of nitrogen in using a decentralized approach. And so This was a component that particularly was of interest to the subcommittee, and we have asked the town to include their evaluation instead of phase 1 to expedite that review in the preliminary design phase. And as far as regional wastewater management opportunities, this map shows a priority for the watersheds. So you have the Nauset Marsh watershed shared with Eastham and Orleans, Pleasant Bay, the upper reaches of Pleasant Bay, Brewster, and the Cape Cod Bay one shared with Brewster to the west and Eastham to the north. And the plan does, and it did evaluate, if the sewers went into the Eastham part of Nauset to attain the TMDL, if they went into Brewster to help attain the regional TMDL, and to the Cape Cod Bay systems, could the system be designed to handle that? Yes, it can, and it can incorporate that as an option at this time. So Orleans is moving ahead. It's got a plan. It incorporates regional opportunities, even though its neighboring towns are not yet in a position to commit at this point. And this is an issue of a number of conditions and findings in your decision. And the regionalization study, the town of Orleans incorporated this into their CWMP. This was funded by Barnstable County, and the capital cost savings are 6 to 9% for the capital costs, and more significantly, 18 to 25% of the operation and maintenance costs can be saved by the towns working together to achieve the TMDLs. Also, the town of Orleans undertook a independent review study that was also funded by the county, and this two takeaway points was the cost-saving measures should be aggressively pursued, especially those regional ones, and that the recommended plan, the CWMP, is sound, based on good science and engineering, and should be implemented expeditiously. I just want to give you this is the initial implementation phase. Here we are at the top of the list in 2011. We may not be early, but we're midway through, coming into it, to complete the CWMP process with this DRI review. And the town anticipates obtaining preliminary design funds in 2013 in spring, doing the preliminary design, and that will offer resolutions and additional engineering. Construction funds would be appropriated in 2015 with phase 1 construction and startup in 2017. And within the general conditions of the permit, we've used this time frame for the preliminary certificate of compliance and the final certificate of compliance being at the startup of the facilities. And also in the general conditions, since each DRR permit is good for 7 years, there is a condition for the town to come in and have it extended for another 7 years. And then again, these are the additional phases going up to 2032. And in all, there's been a lot of talk about adaptive management. We know what adaptive management is. I think we worked out a good plan with the town of Orleans. Orleans had a good one within their CWMP, and we, in your decision, the last 3 pages is a adaptive management scope of work. And this adaptive management scope of work will be worked on by a committee between the town of Orleans Commission and DEP, and including the town of Brewster, on finalizing that scope of work into what the actual adaptive management plan will be. So the adaptive management plan will include implementation of the plan and its milestones, documentation of the capital expenditures, compliance with the groundwater discharge permit, which will be the next phase for the town to look at. Reporting on the estuary water quality monitoring. After all, the plan's significant appropriation of resources with a goal to restoring water quality will be monitored. So this is a performance monitoring component of the adaptive management plan. A summary of the habitat improvements or potential impacts will be a part of the adaptive management plan. Reporting on those non-structural alternative progress is a part of the adaptive management plan. And potential evaluations and changes as needed. And I just want to make sure I stop at the right spot. And finally, we have, as the findings of the decision indicate, we do have agreement on the plan. I'd like to stop my presentation on the plan at this time without getting into all the details of each and every condition. There's 31 conditions, and those 31 conditions mirror those findings of having to deal with what the plan is, the regional opportunities, and the adaptive management plan and reporting.
Can you close it or shrink it?
I'm going to close it because we don't want more than one up running, right?
Thank you, Tom. I'll now, if you bear with me again, it's an old beastie. Open the main presentation back up. Again, I apologize. It has a little bit of trouble with running two at the same time. So now I'll cover the rest of the issue areas in the draft decision, and I have a total of 7 slides. This deals with natural resources, which includes plant and wildlife habitat and wetlands. As Tom covered in his slideshow, the preferred alternative site is the Tri-Town site, and he showed a graphic of that on the screen. It's mapped as a endangered species habitat and/or contains or abuts to wetlands. The rare species in this case is box turtle, and that's covered in the findings in the findings section of the decision under natural resources. The findings note that the potential impacts to eastern box turtle have largely been addressed. The site design, and again Tom showed a graphic, has gone through several iterations, and the final revised site design, which is reflected in the town's CWMP that was completed MEPA review and came forward in the DRI, maximizes the use of existing disturbed areas. Physically on the Tri-Town site there are no wetlands, and basically the cluster systems and the sewer lines are also off the Tri-Town site or linked to it, so it's important that sewer main installation avoid wetlands where possible. As noted just above, the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program, that's the acronym, has not yet made a determination of no take. And that's not unusual because Natural Heritage will also want to take a look at the final concept designs for both the Tri-Town site and potentially the cluster systems. So the conditions are written so that the town will work with Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program to avoid a take of the box turtle habitat. They'll use, as much as possible, disturbed areas for the sewer line installation. There's further commission review in the conditions if the treatment plant is ever expanded beyond its finalized footprint. And the town is also going to develop a plan to manage invasive species. And I would note that the regional policy plan also allows wetland disturbance in a limited fashion for utility line or sewer line installation. In terms of open space, which is also part of the natural resources cluster, this is dealt with by minimum performance standard MPS OS 13. This standard specifically exempts municipal projects for municipal purposes from having to provide open space. The CWMP is such a project, therefore the town is exempt from providing any open space for the project, and that's memorialized in finding open space, finding number 1. The next area is heritage preservation and community character. We're basically looking here when we talk about these issues at the Tri-Town plant site and any above-ground structures that might be associated with the total build-out plan. The key here is impacts to archaeological resources from construction and to historic resources and districts from any above-ground structures, pump stations, something related to the cluster systems, whatever it might be. All of this is, again, memorialized in the findings. MHC is Mass Historical Commission. There's a finding that memorializes the fact that due to a December 20th, 2010 letter, Mass Historical Commission found that the project is unlikely to impact significant archaeological resources at the Tri-Town site. The town is also going to conduct a survey for archaeological resources at sites for those cluster systems that deal with the ponds, and that any above-ground structures will go through the Orleans Old King Highway Historic District to make sure that they're consistent with any district standards. And the conditions reflect that the town is to conduct that survey during the preliminary design phase, again, so that the design can be adjusted to take account of any resources that are located, that any resources that are found are protected, and those are archaeological or subsurface resources, and that they have to continually submit plans for review by Mass Historical Commission and the Old Kings Highway Historic District that's in Orleans. The next issue that came up during the DRI review is transportation, and with any DRI, we look at 3 issue areas in transportation: congestion management, trip reduction, and safety. In terms of congestion management and trip reduction, the findings in the decision memorialize that there will be less than 25 peak hour trips even after the Tri-Town site is redeveloped from the existing septage treatment plant into the wastewater treatment plant. In terms of safety, the findings memorialize that the crash analysis is unnecessary because even when you've got the fully functional, full build-out of the wastewater treatment plant, you have less than 25 peak hour trips. And the stopping site distance at the Overland Way site drive to the treatment plant site meets the required standards. And all of this is memorialized in a letter, at least with regard to the trip numbers, that was received from George Meservey, for the record, on March 18th, 2011. In terms of construction impacts, that was something that came up in a March subcommittee meeting. It was raised by a commission member, Virgilio, and a letter in the file submitted from the town dated March 15th of this year addresses how private and public roads and impacts to them will be dealt with. Basically, the transportation findings and conditions memorialize that the issue is brought up and memorialize the town commitment to restoring public or private ways or roads impacted by construction, and that could be sewer lines, the cluster systems, to better equal condition. And again, that's finding transportation 4 and condition transportation number 1. In terms of the findings for approval, again, this is a development of regional impact, even though it's a comprehensive wastewater management plan. Those are covered by sections 12 and 13 of the Act and section 7 of the enabling regulations. There are basically 4 of them. That it's consistent with the town's local comprehensive plan, consistent with local development bylaws and zoning, and consistent with any districts of critical planning concern, and finally that the probable benefit from the proposed development must be found to be greater than the probable detriment. And one of the guides that the regional policy plan provides to commission members when they're dealing with benefits and detriments are the best development practices. and a letter February 11th, 2011 of this year that's in the record from Mr. Meserve addresses consistency with the local requirements, but I'll just go over them briefly. They're all covered in the general findings. There's a finding that the CWMP is consistent with the Orleans Local Comprehensive Plan, that as a municipal use, it's allowed by right in all zoning districts, that the treatment plant and the cluster systems are allowed by zoning, that there are no districts of critical planning concern or DCPCs in Orleans, so that criteria of approval is not applicable. And in terms of the probable benefits, these are articulated by General Finding 8, and they're listed here on the slide. The probable benefits include public infrastructure for protection of public health, and the improvement of water quality in the aquifer and restoration of marine water quality to meet federally adopted TMDLs for nutrients. The probable detriments are limited to construction activities and the length of time to implement it, and the subcommittee found that the probable benefits of the project are greater than the probable detriment. In terms of the subcommittee's recommendations, and this is my last slide, again, they met in September of this year and just this past week in October to review the draft DRI decision with conditions. They went through 2 iterations, and on the 7th, they voted to recommend approval of the Orleans CWMP as a DRI with decisions and to forward it for your consideration today. That concludes my presentation of the rest of the issue areas, and there are a couple of staff available if you have any questions.
Thank you. I would ask the applicant now for to answer questions or make a presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Chairman Graham. The Board of Selectmen has reviewed and approved.
Your name, please,
Margie
for the record. Thank you.
Margie Folger, Chairwoman of the Orleans Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen has reviewed and approved the draft DRI decision for Orleans. Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. The decision for you is a result of a thorough and well-vetted public hearing process. The subcommittee considered every comment they received by residents as well as our neighboring towns of Brewster and Eastham, resulting in several changes made to the draft decision. Their efforts have produced a recommended decision for the Commission, which is both fair to the town and highly encouraging of regional approaches to wastewater mitigation. We wish to thank the 4 commissioners who comprise the subcommittee, Mr. Putnam, Mr. Roy, Ms. Taylor, and Mr. Virgilio. Mr. Putnam's disarming demeanor and the acceptance of public comment was especially appreciated. Commissioner staff are also to be commended, notably Tom Camberari, to whom most of the review responsibility fell for this application, which is related primarily to restoring water quality. The town of Orleans and its citizens are committed to taking action to ensure the long-term health of its waters. We are committed to continue our discussions with neighboring towns to see if regional solutions make practical sense. The CWMP is a plan that we think serves the town of Orleans and neighboring communities well. We encourage your approval of the DRI decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would ask the commission members if they have any questions. Your comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Short.
This is not a question, but it is I would like to take a moment to commend not only the commission, but the commission staff for all the work that has been put into this project over the years. Also, the select board in Orleans for all their cooperation. The people who have worked on developing the program, which has taken at least 10 years, and I think if you add the last couple of years in, it's more like 12 or 13 years, and it's been a continual process by a number of people in Orleans. We also want to thank the people who have shown up at the hearings and have both pro and con commented on the DRI and also the program as it has been put forward. Their comments have been very helpful and have led us to a point where I think we now have a very comprehensive program to go forward with. And also, I would like to thank the adjoining towns, both Eastham and Brewster, and hopefully they will join in an aggressive study of regionalization. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Flynn.
Well, I too want to congratulate you. This is an awesome project, and I have some understanding about what it takes to get to where you are, so you are truly to be congratulated on this. My question really only relates to the funding model that Tom Cambereri described, which was, if I wrote some notes, $150 million. It affects 26 homeowners. And the split of the property tax with 80% and the betterment being 20%. What part of the project does this cost cover? Does it cover what you've described in terms of the Tri-Town treatment plant? Does it cover all of that? Does it cover any of the cluster developments or down the road? How much of that, what does that $150 million actually cover?
George Meservian, the Planning Director for the Town of Orleans. The $150 million is a conceptual cost that we developed. It includes the full core plan, all those 6 phases, the treatment facilities, the collection facilities, does not include operational costs. And we've just focused on how to break down the capital cost between how much goes on the taxpayer's burden and how much is a betterment to those who are connected.
Thank you.
Yes, further comments? Yes, Elizabeth.
This has obviously been a very long and, based on the meetings I was at times quite controversial, and I hope that maybe things will quiet down in Orleans now. I do want to say thank you very much. Brewster requested to be on the Technical Advisory Committee. TRC? I forget. I've looked at so many of these initials over the last year. We appreciate being put on the committee. I understand we're a non-voting member, but sitting at the table is very important to us. And I had brought it up at a meeting, and then Sims McGrath spoke to it at our next to last meeting, and I want to thank staff and the Orleans Board of Selectmen and Town Planner for agreeing to let us sit on the committee. So thank you very much. And I know you have many, many years to go on from here. So it will be an interesting process to watch, and hopefully Brewster will be participating in their own very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the commission members? I would invite any federal officials present to speak who wish to speak. State officials, local officials who wish to speak. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sims McGrath, Vice Chairman of the Orleans Board of Selectmen. The Wastewater Management Steering Committee in Orleans was formed in 2000. I became involved as the Planning Board's representative to the Steering Committee in 2002 through 2008, and the final year before the committee was disbanded in 2009, I was the Selectmen's representative. I was deeply involved in the development of the draft plan issued in 2008. I feel strongly it was a very robust plan. We had an outstanding consultant. We challenged the consultant repeatedly to develop the best plan, to answer our concerns, and to dig as deep as possible into the information we had so that we had an accurate plan moving forward. The plan has been amended since then. It has been improved by the questions asked by the consultants, by questions asked by concerned citizens, and I think that the plan that the subcommittee had to review is an even more robust plan than we put out initially. I think we can all agree through the adaptive management process, this is not the exact plan that will be implemented. Our design process as we go forward into it will suggest further refinements. It may even suggest some schedule refinements. The commission will be copied on all of these things as part of the conditions. I think the town of Orleans looks forward to getting into the design process. It really is the next step so that we can get the final answers to where we can go with this and get to work on remediating some of the impaired waterways, especially the headwaters of Pleasant Bay, where 100% nitrogen removal is required. The adaptive management plan is proposed in our CWMP, has met with remarkable enthusiasm at the DEP. It has been suggested that our reporting program will become the model that they require for other CWMPs as they come forward. We're glad to have their enthusiastic support on our adaptive management plan and the reporting process, and we think it's a valuable aspect. The CWMP that you have, the DRI recommended decision on our CWMP that you have in front of you has gone through exhaustive review. I too wish to add my thanks to the subcommittee, Chairman Putnam, and the other members who have spent an incredible amount of time reviewing and suggesting and asking questions. I think we have arrived at an extremely good plan. I think the conditions and findings that are in the recommended DRI report before you are just, thorough, and add strength to our plan. I look forward to your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Other local officials.
I'm John Fuller, and I'm just the lowly clerk on the Orleans Board of Selectmen. Speaking for myself only, I have attended nearly all the meetings over the last 7 years on the Orleans CWMP. With the information available, I find the plan a good plan to continue the regulatory process. It is based on facts determined to date. It is an adaptable and new information and technology, and Phase 1 needs to begin as soon as possible, despite the lateness of some of the technical data. Orleans has begun to study a study comparing centralized systems and decentralized systems, which include available technologies and, most important, cost analysis, so the right design criteria can be determined. Orleans has also enlisted the Cape Cod Commission to complete a village center streetscape study. This process is nearly done, and the final report may be available shortly. This encompasses an area that would be served in Phase 1 of the Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Plan. These three avenues of regulation, design, and aesthetics need to converge to be the most timely, cost-effective, and pleasing visual effect. The process has been going on for a long period and needs to approach conclusion. I urge you to support the Cape Cod Commission Subcommittee's recommendation and approve the Orleans CWMP so the next regulatory step can begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other person in the audience like to make a comment?
My name is Charles Harris. I'm the chair of the Eastham Water Management Committee. I want to identify the fact that Eastham is very interested in participating in a regional wastewater program. Our engineer reports have pointed that out, that it's lower cost to all if we go into a regional program. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others in the audience like to make a comment? Seeing none, I would ask the applicant for final comments, if any. No is the response. Any comments from the commission staff at this point? No. I would entertain a motion to close the hearing and the record. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Any discussion of the draft decision? Seeing none, I would ask our representative from Orleans to make a motion on the project and draft decision, please.
I move to approve the proposed Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan as a development of regional impact with conditions.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
I move to approve the draft development of regional impact decision with conditions as amended for the proposed Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you. At this point in the agenda, we are dealing with other business. Do we have any?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Putnam.
I want to thank the committee members who stuck it out on the Orleans Comprehensive Waste Management Committee. One of the longest and certainly one of the most interesting we've gone through, and I'm very grateful to all of you for giving your time and staying with it all the way. Thank you very much.
You get commended for the True Grit team, that's for sure. It's
No, but I like Mrs. Fulcher, that's why I do it.
Okay, at this point, seeing no other business, any comments from the Cape Cod Commission members? Elizabeth.
My question is for Paul about the meeting at Barnstable High School next week that Ann Kennedy brought up. Can you explain a little bit more about that? It sounds rather ominous considering what we've been going through lately.
This is a state hearing on the various efforts to expedite wind siting. So there are a couple of bills that are out there. The committee will be down. They're going to take testimony. We'll be there. I don't expect the version that they will vote on to be much different than the one they voted on last year, which made it through the House into the Senate and sort of stopped there. But we will monitor that and get back to you.
For those of us who may want to attend, could you send out an email with information? Thank you.
Any other comments from the membership? I would I'd consider that a motion. Do I have a second? All in favor?